around the corner. And typically, there's a lot of conversation about Christmas, and I guess that's the weird thing about the Catholics. We don't do a Christmas service because Christmas is one of those things where the text and the tradition don't line up. We've talked all the time that we don't know when Jesus was born. We don't know when Yeshua, more than likely, was born in the spring or in the fall, around one of the major holidays. That's in the text, it's clearly there. And so it's not December. And that's okay, because I was having a great conversation with Walt this week. We were talking about this idea, it's okay, that it's not necessarily biblically accurate, because what are the things that take place in this season? Right? What takes place in this community? Hopefully, typically, when we get to that Christmas spirit, there's a lot of gift giving, there's a lot of gift purchasing. But what do people try to intentionally infuse the spirit of what? Goodness, what else? Generosity. Tax write-offs. Now that's not till the following week. Love, generosity, what else? Compassion, mercy. And these are all biblical things. These are all biblical concepts that we should embrace. And even though it's not a biblical accuracy with the date, these are all things that we should probably emphasize all the time. And if this is a reminder for us to remember those things, let's embrace that. Let's do that. And as a community, especially, we should embrace these biblical holidays, or these biblical values and principles around these holidays. So last week we talked about Qumran. We talked about this community that lived in the desert. They chose to live in the desert. When you think of a desert like this landscape, what comes to mind? What images come to mind? What emotions come to mind? What do you think of? What? Oh yeah, it gets hot in the desert. Isolated. Good. What else?
Israelites.
Think of the Israelites. Okay. What emotions come to mind, Walt? Starvation. Hunger.
Actually, a Walmart. Actually, I look at that as a place of saving, a saving place, because it's, I've always believed that God doesn't save you from the wilderness, He saves you to the wilderness.
Okay, that's the emotion that you think of right away when you think of the desert?
Focus on Him.
Yeah, thanks. Call him out. Now you're sermonizing back there. When you think of the desert, what do you think of?
It can be a beautiful thing.
It can be. Okay? Give me one thing in the desert that's beautiful. Give me one word, one thing in the desert that's beautiful, Lily. Give me one thing in the desert that's beautiful.
Just from pictures, obviously, I've never been in the desert. It almost looks like going to a farm.
Okay. Excellent.
Camels.
Camels are beautiful. That's Gavin. She's been one.
It looks like it.
What's that?
Yeah.
I grew up in the desert. I was there for 20 years. Yeah. Yes. How often, let me ask you a separate question then. Connect with that, but separate. How often do you feel like time just goes too fast?
Always.
Anybody just bored? Probably when you were in the desert, you might have been bored. Not now. How often do you feel like there's just too much to do? There's not enough time to get these things done. Or sometimes you struggle with remembering things because life is going so fast. Anybody? Or is that just me? I feel like daily. Yeah, well, that's not being in the desert. I think that this is the culture that we live in that's so fast-paced. There's so many things happening, all these things we have to do, and I can't keep up with everything. So how do we slow time down? I mean, we have these things, right? Isn't this supposed to help us slow time down? If you turn it off, right? What have we seen since we've actually, has anybody done any studies since the iPhones have come out, or the cell phones have come out, what has happened to our society? Fascinating studies. They've seen that people actually have less time, They have less memory. They have less real connections with human beings. You especially see that with the younger generations now, right? Because what do people in this generation do? They sit next to each other and they text each other. Does that make any sense? You guys do that all the time. I see you in the service. We're doing it right now. Talking to each other on your text. Right? Why do we do that? Why do you guys do that? Why is that an issue? Because we don't understand, especially the younger generation that have more of this at a younger age, they have no real human connection. They don't know how to conversate. They don't know how to, just have a conversation about emotions, what's going on. Just text you. Emojis, especially. We have less real connection, we have less appreciation of what we have. We've never been a more lonely, a more depressed, a more suicidal, more ungrateful, more unhappy society, generations. Yet we have all of this stuff at our fingertips. Why are we so miserable? These are the words that are echoed by the Qumran community. It's not just us that have struggled with these things. These things have gone on for centuries. And the people who lived in the desert, the people who chose to live in the desert, they struggled with the same things. So they left the city. They left the big city lights of Jerusalem. And it's probably hard to see. I don't have a picture of what the Jerusalem temple would have looked like, but it was massive. It would have taken up blocks in St. Bernard's Parish. Right? That you couldn't miss it. You would drive up from the city and there would be this ginormous building, this structure, these huge bricks that were the size of like two of these together. They were this massive structure. And there was everything that you could think of, the markets, the theaters, the gymnasiums. There's all this Roman culture that's infused in the city, and all of this stuff at your fingertips. Anything that you want, you could have. No different than what we have today. So they left. Because they recognize there's a problem. And they ask the question, when we live in the city, how can you actually appreciate and connect with God if you can't appreciate and connect with His creation? If you can't connect with other people, if you can't connect with His earth, the universe, or His Spirit. In the desert, the Essenes realized that it was in our lack, in our nothingness, that we find the secret of abundance. It was in the city that we struggle with seeing the things around us that should be right there at our fingertips. We should be able to see these things, but we just can't see the wonder of living. We can't see the awe of God like we used to when we were children. We asked all of these questions. Everything was wonder. The discovery of things is gone. The more that we have around us, the more we have, I should say, not the more, the less meaning these things actually have in our life. Have you ever gone through your house and you're like looking for something and you open up the cabinets and it's full of stuff. You just can't find the thing that you're looking for? We have all of this stuff, and all of this stuff, and all of these piles, and all of this stuff. We have to, what do we typically do when it's in the way? We just move it over. But we have all of this stuff. Why? We just can't seem to get rid of it. And then it just clutters up, and it's all around us, and we can't find anything. How often do you feel like that's a problem? Maybe we should declutter our house, declutter our life. Maybe it's not stuff, maybe it's appointments, maybe it's conversations, maybe all these things you have to do. The more that we have around us, the less meaning any of it actually has. Wealth and affluence, they said, breeds complacency. And when we strip everything down to its simplest degree, what do we really have then? For this Qumran community, life was about, if you look in their scrolls that they found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, this word is throughout their scrolls everywhere. It's the Hebrew word tamim. And it's connected to another word that you should know called shalom. What's shalom mean? Okay, that's how we translate it in the Bible, but we've given it a deeper meaning beyond peace. Because when we think of peace, we think of no war, no fighting. But shalom goes beyond that. What does shalom mean? Wholeness, right. Shalom is this idea of wholeness. To me, it's the same thing. It's this idea that living in harmony with oneself and with others. This was the theme of the Qumran community. This, to me, we want to live in wholeness with God and with each other. Nothing broken. They believed in transformation, that the only way to get to this point was if we lived transformed lives. But they knew that transformation could only happen one person at a time. This same community knew that they couldn't go into Jerusalem and evangelize everybody and try to get them into this mindset of living this secret life of less. They knew they couldn't transform people's lives and try to get them to focus more on God and their living and their walk with God every day. Because in the city, there's so much stuff. And besides that, you can't transform whole communities and whole cities. They knew the secret of transformation only came if you were willing to transform yourself. It's in reformed individuals that we build reformed communities. Doesn't this sound familiar? Have we heard this before? How many times have we talked about this message from Yeshua, or even Musar, or in psychology? What have I said over and over and over? Nothing changes until what? Till I change. Nothing changes. I can't change Rustin. I can't change Bruce. Who can I change? Only me. How often do we struggle with that? How often do we struggle trying to change other people? It doesn't work. A lot of times it just creates tension, it creates separation, division. Mind your own business. But what would happen if I just worked on changing myself? This was the theme of this community. They understood that the power to change comes from your power to choose. And so these people chose the desert. They chose simplicity. They chose community. They chose to pursue God. And so the question that I had, and I've been studying is, how for this community does this change occur? First and foremost for this community, it began with an encounter. The highest experience of life is a divine encounter with God. When we open ourselves up to God, when we allow ourselves to break down the walls, when we allow ourselves to desperately desire to hear from God, to hear the voice of God, to be moved, to be touched by God, that is the beginning of a life that is lived. Martin Buber was an author from years ago. He said, I require a you to become a me. All actual life is encounter. I require a you. He's talking about God. I require a you so that I can be who? So that I can actually be me. But he said that only happens if I'm willing to have an encounter with the you. What holds us back from these things? What walls have we built up around our heart so that we are so walled up and so protected and so, distant from God because I don't want to get hurt that I can't actually have a real encounter with God? How many times have I been hurt? How many times does my insecurity hold me back? My fear or resentment, anger, heartache? How many walls have we built up so that it's so thick around us, so callous, that we can't even have an encounter with God? Because I'm so afraid to let this wall down. But I'll never have an encounter. So that wall is broken. But it's only then when we have this encounter that we find ourselves in tune with God of the universe. And we experience these spiritual moments. And we experience life. We may be alive if we're not encountering God, if we're not having these moments. We may be alive, but his question is, are you actually truly living that if you've never had an encounter with the Qumran community, it was their responsibility, every individual, to infuse the Spirit of God into every aspect of life. Sometimes it's hard. Because for some people that I've had conversation with, they've never had an encounter with God. They've gone to church for years and years and decades, and they never can look back in their life and they can never say, I experienced God here. And that's crushing to me, because I wonder why. And as I look back on my life, I know there was a very dry season where I didn't even believe in God. Because I had these walls, I had anger, I had resentment, I had despair, I had fear, I had insecurity, all of these things built up into my life. And it was only in a moment where I was broken completely with everything around me that the wall came crushing down. It was at that moment that I had an experience with God. Because I was willing to say, are you actually real? And he answered me. I can point back and I can say, I experienced God here, and I experienced God here. It's not like it happens all the time. But I can tell you in the experiences that I've had, it was life-changing. One of those experiences brought me here. Because God knows, I did not want to come to New Orleans. In fact, my pastor asked me like 3 months before, have you ever thought about moving to New Orleans? And these were my words, excuse my language. Hell no, was what I said. I would never, that word, never move to New Orleans. So why am I here? Because I had an experience with God that transformed my trajectory. At what point do we take ownership of our lives, our actions, and intentionally put our focus on the spiritual? To choose, I am going to seek out the spiritual aspect of God. I am going to pursue Yeshua. When do we intentionally allow ourselves to believe and trust that we actually can have an experience with God? Matthew. Yeshua said this. Oh,
no.
Come back.
Oh.
It's not far away.
Oh.
Ask and it will be given you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. For everyone who asks to seek, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks, the door will be open. I mean, it's a nice phrase. You can probably memorize it and know it. The question is, do you actually believe what the words say? Do you actually believe that if you ask, and you genuinely ask, like, look, I want to pursue you, do you actually believe that that will be answered? Do you actually believe that if you knock and say, I want to pursue you, God, where are you? Do we believe that that will be answered? Or is it just a nice, fluffy phrase that you say to somebody to cheer them up because they're having a bad day? Do you actually internalize these words and believe them to be amen, true, real, firm? The Essenes understood that without community, we talk about this a lot, without community we die. It's in the community that we find belonging. How important is belonging? Anyway, how important is it as a community, as a people, as a human being, to feel like you belong to something? Is it important? Why? Okay? What else? Why is it important? Like I said, yes, you should be. Why? Why is it important to feel like you belong to something? Either one. Go ahead, Josh. Isolation is what? Yeah. It is an innate human characteristic for the need to belong to something. All human beings have this desire to feel like they need to belong to something. It's innate. You're born with this. And if you do not feel connected and you are not belonging to something, guess what happens? You feel, you use the word, isolated. And once you feel isolated, you become depressed. And once you become depressed, it's just this terrible road. For some people, there's suicide. For some people, to horrific things. We all have a need to feel like we belong to something. Human community, they knew that. They knew you have to be a part of something to live life. And so this community, when they gathered in the desert, they built things. They worked together. Construction projects, engineering projects. They have this water aqueduct system where there was so much water, they had all of these ritual baths. They had all of this water for food. They had all this water to plant their gardens. They worked in the field. The moment the sun came up, they all rose together. People went out to their jobs. Some people were in the field. Some people were tilling. Some people were pulling stuff up. Some were doing carpentry. Some people were doing the clothing and stitching clothing. Because here's the thing that probably a lot of people don't know. When you enter into this community, you strip down naked, and you come in as you are. You come in with nothing. You don't get to bring, the truck and the clothes and the cool jewels that you used to have back in Jerusalem. You come in with nothing. And we provide this for you. We provide your clothes. And we'll stitch up your clothes and all this stuff. But this is what we do together. They had prayers together. They ate together. They had ritual mikvahs together. They would all go through every single day, twice a day. They would go through a mikvah. They all did it at the same time. Together, they lived as a community. And it was in this fellowship that they had 4 different words for community. Not because they were separate, and as I've been thinking about this, it's fascinating. It's just a reminder that all of this community has all of these aspects that makes them one community. The 4 different Hebrew words, we'll write them down. It's kahal, Edah. And we've heard these 2 words before. Echad and Rabim. Kahal is a simple thing. Everybody knows this because this is what we do every week. Kahal is when the community gathers together to learn, to hear the words of God, the texts of God. We listen to this, we hear it, we consume it with our minds, with our hearts, and we listen to this so that the Torah can pierce our hearts so that we can be instructed. Matthew says this. Come to me, all you who are struggling and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. We've talked about this word yoke before, right? Yoke is what you put on oxen that pulls you, right? But in a Hebrew context, it also means what? The yoke is the teaching of a teacher. The yoke is the instruction. Take my yoke, Yeshua says. Take my yoke upon you. That means you have to be willing to hear it, to listen, to take it in. I want to hear your teaching. Desire that. I want to encounter the words that you have. I want them to be my words. The next community word they use is Edah. And this is the group that takes these words and they live these words out. We did a sermon almost a year ago on discipleship, Matthew 28. And we talked about go and make disciples. How do we translate that? In your going. And in your going, raise up. Tell me deep. The Edah community is this community that takes these words, that takes this yoke, and they live this stuff out in such a way that people notice, they see you as different. How many conversations has Bruce had with people where the contractors and the workers that know him, that work in a construction field, that are, the typical construction mentality, they recognize him as different. I've seen it. I've met the people. There's something different about your life that people are like, man, this guy's different. Why do you live this way? Why do you act this way? Why do you have so much patience with us? There's something about your life that people are attracted to you like a magnet. And they want to know why you are different. This is the Edah. There's something about you that people are compelled to know more. They live in such a way that attracts other people, not just to yourself, but then to your community that you're attached to. This is how we live. This is what community does. John records Yeshua's message when he says this. Little children. Why? Because we need to remember as a little child, that's when we find awe in these questions. Now I say this to you. I am giving you a new command. Actually, it says a new command in a different text. That you keep on loving each other. In the same way that I love you, you also are to keep on loving each other. Everyone will know that you are my disciple, telling you by the fact that you have love for each other. Everyone will know. The people outside this room will know that you are a disciple because of the way that we love each other. Have people noticed that? Have people noticed how this place is different? Can you point to any of those encounters? Because that's how it should be. That's how they believe and live their life for it to be as well. Yichad, the next one. Yichad implies unity, oneness. Not uniformity, but oneness. The joining together of our hearts, our souls, and our purpose as one being and action connected to each other and on purpose for God. They have a purpose. They have one united together as one group of people in this purpose. This is the same thing that Jesus prays for. He said, may they be one, Father, as you and I are one. Oneness that unites us together as one body, one community, one family. And then the last one, Rabim. This one is great because sometimes we get so consumed with the idea of having to be one as we're all exactly the same. We all think the same way. We act the same way. But Rabim is exactly the opposite. Rabim is the recognition that each and every one of you in this room is unique and different. Rustin has a different talent than Corey. You're different. You're not the same. Aaron is different than Bruce. Nate, you are different than your brother. Right? Every one of us in this room has a unique talent, a gift, a characteristic, a personality that is different than everybody else in this room. There is nothing that you have that is exactly the same to anyone in this room. And they have this mindset, and we have it, I think on a dollar bill where it says, "E pluribus unum," right? This Latin phrase. What does that mean? Where's my doctors? Lawyers? Anybody? From many one, right? All of us in this room are different, but when we combine together, we are one. Each and every person with our unique talents and gifts and strengths. We've taught this for a long time from Romans 12. We've taught like this idea of the zones. Every single one of you has a zone that is unique to who you are. And your job is to pursue that zone and figure out how can I use this zone to benefit my family, my community, my whatever. When a community combines all these unique abilities and the talents that we have in one purpose, that does amazing things. God's blessings poured out in the magnitude that impact is immense. So for this community, Paul, Edah, Yitzhak, Rabim is one community. This idea, next slide. This is just the idea of the Kahal and Edah, is to learn, to live, to be united in purpose, to celebrate diversity. Those are all good things that we should focus on. When I've reflected on these 4 words for weeks now, I ended up asking myself just a few questions. I thought, you should all ask. What are we going to hear? For some, maybe in this room, when will you hear? What are we going to do? What are we going to be united behind? How can we use our gifts and our talents to display our diversity? We're coming upon a new year. At the end of the year, the Gregorian calendar is over. The beginning of the Gregorian calendar starts in January. It's typically that time of year where everybody looks back and reflects, what happened over the past year? What did I do? What did I not do? What was I good at? What did I fail at? Where did I experience God? Is that a good question? How did God change my life this past year? Is that a question? What is God calling me to do next year? What are we going to hear? What are we going to do? We have 2 weeks until we meet again. I hope and I pray over these 2 weeks that you celebrate family, that you celebrate compassion, and mercy, and generosity, and laughter and love. And I hope and I pray in those 2 weeks, in that time, that you also have a moment to reflect. Where was God this past year in my life? Where did I experience it? Where then do I need to pursue? How do I change my life to actually tear down these walls that separate me from Him so that I can pursue Him? Let's pray. Father, we thank you for an opportunity to ask tough questions. To ask questions that sometimes we may not like the answer to. But I pray, Father, that you convict us as a community. How can we grow? How can we break down these barriers that are pulling us back? And how can we come near you? I pray, Father, for your Son Yeshua to convict us by his words, that we may take his yoke upon us, that we learn to internalize these words, live these words out as we seek and desire you with all of our heart, so that you may use us to be a light in this community, to bring these values, this love, this hope to the people that live here, who need to hear your voice, your hope. Move us, Father. Praise you.